The following is a public preview of the New Models podcast. For our complete library, visit patreon.com/newmodels or newmodels.substack.com.
New Models Talkcore.
Talkcore. It's talk, but it's also core.
Blah, blah, blah.
It seems everyone is talking about Talkcore.
Would you like more Talkcore?
It's Talkcore from New Models.
Welcome to New Models. I'm Carly Busta. On this episode, we welcome back returning guest Gideon Jacobs to talk about a piece he just published in the LA Review of Books titled Player One and Main Character. It looks at the relationship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump to make sense of a deeper ontological change in the way that this administration and increasingly power at large seems to function now. If you're a regular New Models listener, you may have heard Lil Internet's monologue, Hallucinator's Dice, from March of this year. After Gideon listened to the episode, he immediately sent us a message to say that he, a few weeks prior, had just filed a new text with the LA Review of Books, and it covered uncannily similar ground. Both his and Lil Internet's pieces start with Elon Musk at Vox's 2016 Code Conference publicly revealing his belief that the world is, in fact, a simulation. And critically, both pieces were motivated by an observation that those in power, particularly in the US, are, to quote Gideon, behaving as if reality is, to some degree, a fiction. Yesterday, Easter Monday 2025, Pope Francis passed away. In the tributes to his life that headlined legacy outlets, a picture emerged of not only a humble and progressive pope, but a richly dimensional one. A pope who, born in 1936, lived a life that spanned the rise of radio, TV, and the internet, as well as the corresponding forms of power that they both enabled and undid. A pope who fled fascism in Italy, resisted the junta dictatorship in Argentina, and in his capacity as head of the Vatican, rejected luxury, advocated for the poor, and called attention to hypercapitalism's incredible toll on not only human life, but all life on our planet. I bring up the Pope here because, to borrow something Julian said as we were eating dinner last night, Pope Francis, by all measures, seemed to exist in base reality. Which is to say, a reality where cause and effect function more or less the way you'd expect. A reality where Earth's physics apply. A reality where there are no externalities because everything is eventually calculated into the real cost. A reality where law is executed and observed, not just in letter, but also in spirit. A reality where life is real and also miraculous and therefore valued above material gain. One of the things I think is so confusing about this time, at least in the US American sphere, is that so much of the decision-making seems to be happening outside of what most of us would recognize as base reality, even though the material effects, as well as the institutions that house them, are still rooted there. In the conversation that follows, which was recorded March 30th in advance of the release of Gideon's piece last week, we explore that disconnect, as well as where we think things might go from here. I'm Carly Busta. My co-host is Lil Internet. Our guest is Gideon Jacobs. Let's get into it.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Gideon. Welcome back to New Models.
Oh, my God. What a pleasure. How's Berlin and how's Coco?
She's great. I have to say, I just want to say, so we're speaking with Gideon Jacobs again. We spoke to him this November, right after the presidential election. But I feel like, Gideon, that essay has been in my brain, heavily weighted in the training data, as we might say these days, ever since. I mean, and I'm so excited that you have a new piece that's coming out. We're recording before the piece comes out, but you gave us a preview of this piece, and it's fantastic.
Thanks, Carly. I mean, I feel like if I've entered your training data or something, you guys have long been in mine. So.
Well, I have this intro paragraph that I did write to try to set things up, so maybe I'll just say it anyway. When we last spoke to Gideon, it was shortly after the US election, and Gideon had published a piece in the LA Review of Books titled Trump Loy, which explored Trump as image, specifically the kind of image that you generate. In contrast to a Dem candidate like Kamala Harris, who, as if an old-fashioned photograph, to borrow Gideon's language, aimed to represent reality truthfully in a dutiful one-to-one relationship with facts. Trump was successful in Gideon's argument because he prompted reality, and in doing so, expediently produced the character and the narrative that Americans wanted to see. We're speaking to Gideon on March 30th, 2025, and he's just filed a new piece with the LA Review of Books that dovetails with the theme of Julian Little Internet's recent monologue, Hallucinator's Dice, in which Julian meditated on what it means for the richest person in the world, Elon, to have the ear of the president of the richest country in the world while interfacing with reality as if it's the video game Diablo 4. Gideon, there are so many places that we could start this conversation, but why don't we ask you to unpack the first part of your thesis for this piece, which at least is provisionally titled Player One and Main Character, demystifying the perhaps unlikely first buddy relationship between the world's currently most famous bully and most powerful nerd. So, by the time this comes out, the title may have changed, but, I think you DM'd Julian
also, the whole reason this podcast kind of came about is because I had done this monologue about Elon Musk's belief in simulation theory, and concurrently we were both writing something that ended up tracing a similar line on the scatter plot that is Elon Musk, that the entire world is sort of thinking about and looking at. So even in my piece, I anticipated others would have said the things in this piece. Others probably will. You can't really claim alpha on...
I like this idea of I think we're post-hot take. It's like you're using a similar set of prompts, basically, and you were both thinking in terms of simulation. But specifically, and I think something that your piece doesn't reconcile, Julian, although you do a lot of other things in your piece, is this relationship between Trump and Elon. So if Elon's living in a simulation, who or what then is Trump? Provisionally, this piece is titled Player One and Main Character. What do you mean by that? And I'll let you say, it's such a good thesis. I love it. I so want to say it, but I need to give it to you to put it in your own language.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was listening to Hallucinator's Dice and I was laughing out loud at just how similarly I was thinking about this. So I had already sent in the piece to LARB 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually, maybe more. Then I was listening to Julian's piece and it was so affirming and almost unsettling. I was we were both just pulling from the ether in parallel in a way that was honestly wonderful. And
we both start in the same exact place and end in a similar place as well. We both open with Elon at the Vox Code Conference in 2016.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, and now I'm really just sort of glazing up your show here, but I was listening to the Mark Leckie episode, and that also was this really affirming experience because I've had this weird obsession with Byzantine iconoclasm for the last 5 years and have been writing this novel that's partially, a kind of Game of Thrones-y dramatic exploration of Emperor Leo III, who's the emperor, a couple emperors before what Mark wrote about.
Yeah, right.
So it's such a niche thing, but just to hear an artist like Mark, who I respect and admire, is sort of in parallel had a similar niche obsession, just makes me feel less insane, actually, in some ways.
I mean, I was thinking also when we were talking to Mark about how, and to borrow Mark's language, he has this work in his show, this short film of a city that he says existed before One Point Perspective and then will exist after. And it really feels like we're in this moment of the dissolution of One Point Perspective. And right now at the Deutsches Historisches Museum, there is an Enlightenment show talking about the birth of the Enlightenment in Germany, which of course, played a pretty big role in the German imaginary. And as you see these telescopes and microscopes, and as you see the do not touch signs that were invented in the 18th century, we are really just seeing an undoing of that. We are feeling more than seeing. We are sensing more than reading. I mean, there's just really this return to the way we touch a Byzantine icon, giving a human impression is the way that we informationally touch something in the LLM space, creating and embedding. There's so much to this. And I feel like your work really understands where I think we're going with communication. And so this Trump Elon thing is almost just an object study in a much larger phenomenon.
Well, so that's where I tried to go with this piece. In some ways, we'll get to Trump and Elon in a sec, but it really tries to frame them as a symptom of something much larger. And, you talked about the disappearance. How'd you phrase it? The disappearance of 1 point perspective?
Yeah, the dissolution of 1 point perspective.
Dissolution of 1 point perspective. Yeah, to me, the dissolution of 1 point perspective is in some ways like a spiritual muscle or a psychotechnology or something.
Yeah.
Maybe the way into actually talking about Elon and Trump is I was talking to one of the great people in the world and a dear friend, Ruby McAllister, last night, and we were talking about chaos magic. And she told me like Peter Thiel is into chaos magic or like connected to, and just in terms of the fact that the new right, it seems to be recognizing in some ways this postmodern moment, but also the power of belief being what imbues or charges arbitrary symbols with power. And I'm saying this because Julian sent me an email about manifesting and just like that there are these people who have completely unhooked themselves from 1 point perspective in some way. And, when we talked about last time I was on your show, all that had to go right for the Trump image of the assassination attempt to happen.
No, right.
There is a magic to him, but I would argue it's kind of like a black magic.
Right.
I actually never thought about this administration or even Thiel as having any interest in chaos magic, but as someone whose life was changed by Peter Carroll's Liber Null, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, in chaos magic, for example, if you feel like you're a little wimpy and need to be aggressive, you do a ritual surrounding yourself with anything symbolic that to you and your own subjectivity symbolizes or captures the essence of like war and aggression. So it's this really open, utilitarian or paradoxically rationalist way to engage with magic ritual, where you would just beat war drums and hold swords and knives and like smear blood on your walls and like listen to Slayer or something. And try to become the imaginary warrior until that becomes ingrained in your subconscious and eventually becomes habit. I mean, that opens a door I'm not prepared for, but now I am going to be thinking of this administration as a chaos magic magician administration. I mean, look at Hegseth, though, right? Like, he's covered in literal crusader tattoos, these sigils of some great battle he's imagining taking place. But I'm not prepared to dig into that. I always dreamed of having Peter Carroll on the podcast at some point, but yeah.
I hope I just sparked like the next monologue, and it's going to be about chaos magic and Peter Thiel.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to translate it into a sigil later, come on it, and then burn it, and then it'll bring it into existence.
Dude, my work here is done. Great. Sounds good. Wait, but just to try to get us back. Okay, so Carly, you wonderfully summarized at least the beginning of this piece. I think maybe explaining sort of how it came to be is the easiest way for me to do it. And, just to include like more the greater New Models universe, as having a drink with Trevor Paglen and Dean Kissick, who have both been on your show and are both really thoughtful people. And I think I said to Trevor, Elon's a simulationist. And there's just so many examples of him on record saying it, with his classic matter-of-fact autistic. Elon really knows how to play his autism for dramatic effect, which is something that's really interesting. So much of my interest, and I think your guys' interest, is in how, whether it's conscious or unconscious, the way they know their value is entertainment and the way they optimize accordingly. And it's really interesting to watch Elon say crazy things with utter confidence and utter certainty. But basically, yeah, like the amount of times he's on record just saying, there's a 1 in billions chance that this is base reality. And the audience is always kind of quiet for a second. And then he looks at them being like, look at the math, sort of. But basically I was talking to Trevor and Dean, and I think then Trevor said something like how formative that sort of orientation in Silicon Valley is under-recognized or something. And it made me think of the Sam Altman tweet from a couple years ago. That's basically like, the one thing I believe in is like the Atman and the Brahman. But it started me on this rabbit hole of thinking about Elon's simulationism. And that really got me thinking about how much Trump and Musk, who really are different, they don't really make sense as a pair in so many ways. Like, I think Trump is born out of a generation that would find Elon incredibly uncool and not someone he wants to be seen next to. I mean, Trump really does have a mentality of nerds are embarrassing. And Elon obviously is socially not very gifted and an autistic nerd. Another actually good Sam Altman quote is, Elon wants the world to be saved, but only if he's the one to save it, or something like that. Which is to say that Elon has a pretty flexible ideology too, as long as it keeps him as player one. But I do think Elon is so ideologically driven, like you can just see it in his eyes, this incredible, I would say, gamer desire to die for them, to like run into battle for them. I mean, Trump doesn't have that. He's become much more ideologically oriented as he's entered politics. I still think of him as like a spacious Trojan horse for the ideologues. I mean, he's just an incredible entertainer and comedian. And so I started to think about what this odd couple shares. And what I really arrived at is they have an extremely unusual relationship to fiction. In the article, I sort of trace what I called their journeys through fiction. Trump beginning in tabloid era New York under the tutelage of Roy Cohn, through The Apprentice and reality TV, and then landing in Twitter. And Musk as, a serious gamer, like maybe the most serious gamer we've ever seen in a position of power. The fact he's a gamer is not that significant. Most Americans are. It's his relationship to games, how you hear him talk about reality, and the way you hear people who are around him talk about the way he functions as if the game is still plugged in. And then the fact that Trump and Musk met in Twitter, and that was, this giant proto-virtual reality where they changed. And I try to make the argument that the change is not simply that we see of the average like Rust Belt uncle, but that of two men who have descended fully into a fictional self.
So you have the bully and the nerd. You have their unlikely coming together. I think one of the things that's so complicated about this time is that we're operating in a couple of different narrative tiers, I guess is a way to say it, and meta tiers. So there's the base reality that most of us experience in like our daily lives of going to school or work and having children and all this everyday stuff. And then there's Trump. He's playing his Don Corleone, Kaiser Wilhelm, Gordon Gekko. Like he's like living his dream as this character and he's hoping for an Oscar. And then you have Elon, who has Trump as a very useful avatar for interfacing with this reality, right? So it's like Trump is the avatar for Elon, and Elon is working in like a video game space, and Trump is working in like a entertainment TV space. And so they're like actually in two different spheres, and Elon is able to play Trump to some degree, and Trump is very happy to take whatever role. You put a speech in that guy's hand on brand with Trump's character, and he's going to deliver the crap out of that talk. Like he's going to do a really good job. You get him off script and he just kind of starts rambling. And Elon is pretty amazed that he has an avatar, a main character that he can kind of, it's not that Trump is him, but it is the avatar that he's moving through his gaming space, right? And then you have this like millennial PMC class that for better or worse, anyone working in old school journalism is still kind of a part of. And I mean, as you later get to in your piece, Trump and I guess then by association Elon, they're working on like a different ontological level. So trying to intervene in the old school way just doesn't make sense. But I guess if Trump is the boomer Hollywood main character, to him, Americans are the audience that needs to go to the box office in order to make his movie a success. And then if Musk is player one, what does that make all of us? Like, what then is the public? Like, how could the public most effectively see themselves? How do you speak about the masses in this relationship?
That's super interesting. And it's super interesting. Thank you for asking it. The end of this piece takes a turn. I sort of, in some ways, hesitant to do at first, but then was like, fuck it. I offer the closest thing I will ever offer to like a way forward or a call to action. That's not really my style, honestly. But to answer your question, Carly, You know how there's this like desire and in some ways belief that Trump and Musk are doomed to start fighting and this town's not big enough for the both of them kind of feeling. And I think that's playing with like an old fashioned idea of narcissism in a way. And what you're pointing to that I really like, I think they are functioning on different planes. Like they're on their own planes. So the fact that Elon is player one and Trump is main character actually allows them to coexist. So, you know, what are they to each other? What are the masses to them? I mean, they need us and they need each other because Trump needs a cast, and that cast includes sidekicks and villains, you know?
Right.
Like they need Hakeem Jeffries and Pelosi and Hillary. Like those are completely necessary. You know, back to that Sam Altman tweet about Elon wanting to save the world. I mean, how many times about how many different subjects, whether it's in politics or his company, does he frame things as a hero's quest to save the world that he's at the center of? And obviously in every hero's quest, you need the masses to be saved.
Right.
You need bad guys to be overcome. You need like the stakes actually to be not just really high, but the probability of succeeding really low, because that is what makes for a good story. I would recommend listening to Know Thy Enemy. Do you know that one? It's this political podcast. To prepare to talk to you guys, I listened to it to do even more background info on Elon. And they talk about how he would make money in a company and then let it all ride on the next one. Like he was one of the few guys in Silicon Valley who like would be that risky. And just a way of saying, like, we talked a lot about last time I was on your podcast, the role of story. Like, think about how much risk taking is what makes for great story. And in some ways, like, in order to be the hero, he needs the odds stacked against him.
Right.
And for there to be risk of actual annihilation, of actual loss.
Which means that he also believes that he can single-handedly save everybody. Like, he's obviously not risk adverse, but he takes risks knowing that he's the richest man in the world, right? And with Trump as his avatar, there's a team of people around him who can produce the images that can create the reality that he wants. So, I mean, I guess there's, as you say in your piece, like, you don't think he'll actually jump off a building and believe that he'll return okay in his base reality. Like, he does know, he's like conscious of like where reality begins, but he also knows that he's A, the richest person in the world, and B, that he's surrounded by people who are really good at, you know, the Roy Cohn tradition of overrunning existing reality with a shock and awe regime of image production, which just forces the new reality to be true. So I never thought about that, though, that Elon is acting in this way because, I mean, as we know from that 2016 tweet, he cares about something being cinematic. And to prepare for this, I was listening to your conversation with the LA Review of Books, their podcast, and you were reinforcing the point that you also make in your piece, that reality may be bending towards the cinematic in a time when we're all prompting. That is our mode increasingly. I just came from this Enlightenment show. Did I just say this in the beginning too? And I'm really just thinking about how important it was to see an image representing a truth and then to, without touching it or sensing it, to be like, yes, this is a picture of an exotic bird that exists in Madagascar. I believe that to be true. And now the mode would be, I bet there's this wild bird that exists somewhere.
I mean, like, generate me a wild bird that's never been discovered before from Antarctica that lives 1,000 feet under the ice.
Exactly. And then if that touched enough people, it doesn't matter that that bird doesn't exist. It could have. Just this idea that we can bend reality towards what we want to see prompted. And that Elon takes these great risks knowing that this is more or less how things function. I guess.
I mean, this is like what happens when I talk to you guys. And this is why I was excited to talk to you guys. I have so many things that I would love to talk about in response to that.
Then go for it.
Okay,
go for it.
Okay. So Carly, I feel like what you're pointing to is the relationship between imagination and reality is a much more...
If you're hearing this message, you've completed the first step towards becoming a New Models member. To continue, visit patreon.com/newmodels or newmodels.substack.com. A complete library containing hundreds of rare New Models episodes awaits.